There are certain films you need to watch in full screen, and in this video I'm going to go over a few and explain why. Before I do that, a little bit of background on aspect ratios, and a special thanks to this commenter for giving me the idea to go explore this in a bit more detail. Back in the day, TVs used to be more square. As a matter of fact, the average TV for every inch it was tall would be 1.33 inches wide, or in other words, it would be a 4:3 aspect ratio. The problem with this was, most movies were in a much wider aspect ratio. Generally, for every inch they were tall, they were 2.4 inches wide, or a 2.4:1 aspect ratio. So when they would release movies on VHS and DVD back in the day, they were faced with a decision. Do they put black bars in the top and bottom of the screen, or crop the image to fill the entire 4:3 screen? Some movies opted to crop the image and did what was known as a pan and scan. They simply picked the part of the frame they wanted to show on TV and chopped off the rest. This is what led to movies being modified. As a matter of fact, you may remember seeing this message on your screen before watching a movie. For me, this was kind of the death sentence for the movie. If I saw this, I wouldn't want to watch a movie. Because for me, even though my TV is completely filled with the image, I feel like I'm missing out on a lot. I would much prefer having black bars on the top and bottom of my screen and seeing the entire image. But what I didn't know is oftentimes, these movies would be filmed in a much larger aspect ratio and then cropped on the top and bottom for their theatrical release. And many of these movies have what's called an open matte format, which looks like this. This is typically because the movie's filmed on 35mm film, and in some cases those frames for every inch they are tall can be 1.2 inches wide, giving you a much taller image that's nearly a square. So depending on how they film the movie, there can be a lot more information that they film, and then they crop a lot of it out for a theatrical release to give you that widescreen effect. So sometimes, when movies go to release a full screen version of the film, they don't just pan and scan across this image and do something like this. Instead, they go back to the original 35mm film and they grab the frame from there, giving you a much taller image without the need to crop entire sections off the side of the film. Now, the Spider-Man example I showed is a bit extreme, so what I want to do is walk you through 6 films that I have both a full screen version of and a widescreen version of to show you exactly how much is getting cropped in the full screen and let you know which ones are worth investing your time in and watching the full screen version of the film. So how did I do that? Well, in short, I took the cropped version of the film or the modified version of the film and overlaid it over the widescreen. I lined up the frame as best as I could so you can see exactly where the image was cropped between a widescreen version of the film and a modified version of the film. So let's jump right into our first movie, which is going to be Shrek 2. So again, I laid the full screen version of the movie on top of the widescreen version, so those black bars you see adjust based on where the image was cropped between the two versions of the film. The reason I went with Shrek 2 is I wanted to start with an animated movie. My assumption is that when they make movies like this, which are computer animated, they are not wasting time rendering part of a frame that's never going to be seen. So my assumption is this would just be a straight up pan and scan. But as you can see, it isn't. While it doesn't add much to the top and bottom in the full screen version, there is a little bit more of the image there that you don't see in the widescreen. Now, is this groundbreaking or is this detail that just changes the movie? Not at all. But it was still interesting to see that they rendered out a version of the movie that was a little bit taller, cropped it, and then when they went back to do the full screen, expanded it just a little bit. But ultimately, if you've seen the widescreen version of this movie, you are missing very little if you go back and watch the full screen. Next up is The Incredibles. So what's interesting about this film is I was watching it and it looked like a straight up pan and scan. As you can see, the frame is just sliding along to keep the image center and cropping out the sides. But I looked closer and something was a little bit off. That image seemed too wide for 4:3. So I want to freeze frame here just to point out something that I thought was pretty interesting. The full screen picture takes up almost as much space as the widescreen image. What's going on here? Well, in order for me to show you exactly what was cropped from the image, I stretched this image so it matched up as best I could with the widescreen version behind it. However, if you're watching this on full screen, this image is going to be in that same rectangle on your screen as every other shot. Now, I say that, but I'm truly not 100% sure if they're compressing the sides or maybe taking that full screen image, stretching it, and cropping the top and bottom. It's kind of hard to tell. My guess, though, is that they're compressing the sides to get it to fit in the full screen box. And that's what made the full screen version of The Incredibles so incredible. Anyway, so as we continue on, again, you can see most of this movie is just a pan and scan where, if needed, they stretched or compressed the image to get it fit in that 4x3 box. If you look close enough, you can actually see it happening throughout this scene a little bit, where the bars will get just a little bit wider and just a little bit narrower. Made it kind of a pain in the butt to edit, but I figured most of it out. Anyway, as for The Incredibles, again, stick to the widescreen. The full frame, full screen DVD just crops out way too much. Alright, let's move on to Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Now, I believe this movie was filmed on 35mm, and as you can see, the full screen edition of the movie shows a lot more on the top and the bottom of the screen than the widescreen edition. And while the full screen edition does chop off a little bit of each side of the frame, you're not really losing much, and you are gaining a bit more in the top and bottom. And if you watch this scene as all the letters come flying in, you can see a bit more in the full screen version of the film than you can in the widescreen. So for me, this is definitely a movie I would watch in full screen. So if you have seen this movie a bunch of times and you're a Harry Potter fan and you have not seen the full screen version of the movie, just know that that version of the movie is taller, a little bit less wide. It was designed to fit 4x3 TVs, but like I've been saying, you get a little bit different effect when you watch the full screen version of the movie, and if you don't mind the black bars on the sides of your TV, this one's worth a watch. And with that, its sequel, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Again, everything I said about Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone applies here to Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. The full screen version of the movie is taken from that open map format, so everything you see in the full screen DVD is a little bit taller. This one does crop a little bit more off the sides than I think Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone did, but they do a good job panning and scanning to keep what you need to see in the center of the screen. Again, when they're cropping the image, they're not cropping people or characters, they're usually just cropping out some dishes. Up next is the Da Vinci Code. I'm not sure if this was shot on 35mm or not, I couldn't find a definitive answer to that. But based on what I've learned making this video, I'm pretty sure it was. Again, a lot more information on the top and bottom of each image, but they crop the sides a bit as well. Honestly, even though you do get that taller aspect ratio in the full screen, I personally would still watch the widescreen version of this movie. Finally, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. If you've watched other videos or shorts on my channel, there's a few of them in which I've talked about this movie already, and I absolutely think you should be watching the full screen version of the film if you are a Lord of the Rings fan and you haven't watched it yet. For the most part, the widescreen edition of the film looks great, but in shots like this, where they're showing this massive statue, it gives it a little bit more height, and it makes the moment more impactful when the image focuses on the statue and there's not a lot of extra stuff on the sides. So this is why I like the full screen version of the movie, at least for these few shots in the movie. Overall, I do think that the widescreen is a much more cinematic experience for this movie, but I 100% recommend you watching the full screen version of the film if you haven't seen it already. There are some parts where they pan and scan. It's just a different experience to watch a movie that I've watched over and over again and I love. If you like this video, leave a like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and have yourself a great day.